All right. Let's see how many hits we get here. Probably not many. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so I'm just posting this in chat real quick. If anybody ends up joining in here or watching this later, shoot me a comment. Let me know how the audio sounds here. So we're going to see how this goes. Music might be a little loud, might be fine. I don't know. We'll figure it out. So pretty much like the stream title is here, we're going to be doing some model rips from dotHack GU last Recode. There's a couple of fan projects out there that use the models for some other programs like Minecraft servers, VRs, that kind of stuff. So we're just trying to get like a full stable of, at the moment, cutscene models for all the major characters. So I've been working on kind of digging through each of the characters here over the last month or two. So let's see here. So I got a list here of who I finished up and who we're going to hit today. Okay, Ina, Haseo 4th, Ovon. Okay, the Ovon form should be pretty interesting, so let's go ahead and give that a shot. So we're going to do Ovon form 3. So let's see here. We're going to do a search for. So I already have. With GU last Recode, it had all of the model data and information spit out in some files. I just kind of ripped them open using some tools that I found online. I think it was like a CCS ripper or something like that, to just kind of spit them out into a bin file into a bunch of independent files for like different models, textures, images, that kind of thing. So we're looking up Ovon's model here in a program called Studio CCS. What this does is actually unencrypts the CCS files themselves so that you can see the model, see the rigging for it, all that sort of stuff, and we're going to go ahead and kind of modify it as necessary. So according to the model scheme, we're looking for one OVA 03. He's in the common file directory. All right. So that means he shares this model on each of the different games instead of having an individual model for each, which works fine for us, honestly. So opening up, the first thing you want to do here in the process, once you've got your CCS file pulled up, you want to pop open, you'll see a couple of different sections here. You'll see clumps, materials, and textures. So the materials, though you can't view them in CCS, you can export them, and that'll just be the image files for the characters, like their skin, their armor, their eyes, hair, all that kind of stuff. And it's usually split into a few different ones. You'll see here, since it's a cutscene model, it's a bit more complex than the standard models, the standard in-game models. So you see you'll have a texture for the hair, for their face, the eyes, the body, and then the SGS, which I don't know what that is off the top of my head. But since it's Ovon, it's probably some additional XRC form. Materials just split it up into each of the different pieces of the model itself. You'll see there's a left and right eye, which just copies the eye texture to each one. You have your face, you have your hair, the main body itself, and then again that SGS, which I'm not sure what it is, but we'll be able to see here shortly. And then finally, if you go under the clumps, you'll actually be able to see the model itself here. So what we are going to do to actually prep this to be exported and used in other programs, the first thing we need to do is edit the bones, which is pretty much the structure for the model itself. So we're going to see, when we look at it here, it's a little bit mangled. You'll see his head is kind of like flipped upside down, shoved into his chest. His arms don't look right. His cloak needs kind of adjust a little bit. So that's pretty much the main problem. This is going to be the one that's going to take the most effort here. So to start off, we're going to get the model looking properly. So We're going to just kind of tweak these axes. You'll see on each one of these pieces it has position, which from the 0 point, which is the dead center of the model viewer here, tells it which direction it goes and by how many. I don't know what the exact measurement, not pixels, but something akin to that. Rotation is just literally how the model flips itself around that axis, around that center point, and scale is how big the object is compared to when it was created initially before they threw it in the game. So most of the objects are going to be a 1-to-1 scale. If you wanted to make it particularly big, you can amp those up. Like if for whatever reason we wanted Ovan to be double scale, we could put all this up to 2, and you see he kind of like pops a bit bigger. We shouldn't need to mess with that. So we're just going to leave those set at 1 for now, and we're going to change his rotation so he is standing upright. Okay. And now since we got him standing upright, he's still not quite in the center position, so we can't zoom and view him very well. So we're going to go ahead and pop that Z-axis down to 0, which will put his center point in the middle of our view grid here. And we're going to be playing a lot with the Z-axis just to get a better glimpse at what sections we're going to be working on at any given time. Since we're going to be working on his head first, head and arms, that's where I like to start. We're going to go ahead and put this at a negative 0.5. That should move it to about his shoulders. Yep. Okay. And then we're going to break his model out itself here. The file structure itself is, well, the piece structure is a bit more complicated. So the trawl and the main object file are just the overall pieces, and then as you go back down in, it separates into individual segments. So you see we went to his pelvis, which kind of splits a lot of his body positioning from his footsteps. Footsteps is an invisible object. I believe it actually is meant to track as he's moving, as the model's moving in game. Every time the foot hits down at the kind of 0 plane, it sends a trigger to the game to tell it, hey, there's a footstep, make your sound. So it's not going to have any visual aspect here, so we don't need to really mess with it, but it's still an important piece of the model puzzle overall here. Next we have the pelvis we're going to break open. We're going to have the thighs, which are all the leg stuff goes under there. Tail, which in this case is going to be, you see he has like a skirting behind his legs there. That's going to be his tail. The main body itself is just like general positioning. You'll see it highlighted a blue symbol down there to show that that's where it's tracing. Again, it's another invisible aspect that probably has more to do with hitboxes, so we're not going to mess with that. It's going to be invisible. It's not going to affect us directly here. So we're, like I said, since we're going to start the work on the head and arms, that is going to be under the spine setting, so we're going to pop that first, and we are going to go down to his neck. Clavicles are the pieces that handle the arm, and it's located like where your clavicle will be in the human body, upper chest, just below the neck. The head piece itself is all the individual head pieces. Now, when I'm working on these models, I like to do the arms first to just get them positioned correctly and a little out of the way here. You'll see it kind of crushed his upper chest area inward because the arms aren't being displayed properly. They're kind of pulling against their boundaries and messing with the other portions of the model because of that. So we're going to get those evened out first off. So the clavicle, we're going to start with the rotation aspects. So we're going to put these all back to 0, and that's going to put the main clavicle piece back to its default position. And you'll see not only did the arm itself jut upward, it also tweaked the section over here, since this is the right arm, even though it was over on the left side. That's kind of one of the things that you got to worry about whenever you're working on these model projects here. A lot of times the body parts get flipped whenever they're exported, so you got to position them properly to where they belong on the body. So both of the arms, that's very common with these models, from dotHack GU, for whatever reason, the arms tend to get swapped around. So we're going to go up to the left clavicle now. We're going to set it all to zeros, and if you watch this area down here, you'll see it distort and kind of pop out a little bit because the clavicle is going back. The left clavicle, which is this arm section here, is going to go back in its proper place. So you'll see that jut out a bit. So it's not quite so concave. And there's still a little bit of work to be done. So for each of these, we're going to move from the clavicle, since the clavicle's in its proper position now, we're going to move to the upper arm piece itself. And again, we're going to zero these out. You see, let me undo those. So pretty much the only one being with any significant torque or adjustment here is the Y position, which is where you can see the arms up at an angle. That's because those are at 40 odd degrees here, so we're going to set those back to 0. The X positioning is going to be the forward and backward, so it is very, very slightly tilted forward, which we're probably not even going to be able to notice at all. But actually, let's see here. We are looking at the, let's see, the right upper arm, which is going to be this white arm here. So you'll notice if we do change that X position down to 0, you'll see it twitch ever so slightly backwards. And that was almost imperceptible. That was almost impossible to see. But it was significant enough to make a change whenever you go out to like the fingertips. You'll notice those from where they originally start shift kind of significantly. Slightly, but significantly. And that's enough that we want to zero it out. Same with the Z axis, which just makes it tilt downward a little bit. So once we adjust this, that was even less perceptible. But still, whenever you're doing large-scale edits like this, it's better to zero out as many things as possible before you start to work, so they don't kind of create any chain effects down the line and kind of cause things to adjust where you don't expect them to adjust correctly. And sorry to anybody that hears my chair creaking around. It's a little noisy, but I'll try to keep that to a minimum. Okay, that's kind of enough explaining how these all work. So we're going to set the upper arm to 0, and you'll see it straighten out. But we do, to start off with, want these models in a T-pose. That pretty much just basically means torso straight up and down, arms out to the sides, either straight, or in this case, we're going to want them down at a slight angle to better replicate how the muscles and such were modeled to look whenever this was originally created. So we're going to take that right clavicle we were working on. We're going to go back to the clavicle instead of working on the upper arm itself here, just to straighten it out. We're going to put the Y-axis, I believe, goes to 90 degrees. So anybody that isn't used to working with rotations like this, it goes negative and positive up to 360. So you'll see earlier whenever I was putting the main body into the proper standing position, I used a negative 90 degree angle. That is exactly the same as a 270, which is 360 minus 90. So the whole thing goes on a 360 big circle rotation. So it just tends to be a little simpler to math it out if you go up to 180, and then if you go past that, just do negative whatever past that. So in this case, we're going to throw, it doesn't matter a whole lot whether you use full positive numbers or negative numbers. The system sees them exactly the same. It just depends on what's easier for you to recognize and math out. But we're going to go ahead and throw the arm at a 90 degree Y angle, which should get it to rotate down by 1/4 of its total rotation, since 90 is a quarter of 360. And it should point straight out to the right here, if it's done right. Okay, so that did throw itself out to the right correctly, like we want it to. But it doesn't quite look right. Let's see here. So that was the... Oh, I went back down to the right upper arm whenever I switched back, so sorry about that. We want to do the clavicle at 90 degrees on Y. So the upper arm itself just starts at literally the upper portion of the arm and kind of affects the whole way down the model. We actually want this joint in the shoulder, in the torso itself, to be repositioned also, so it doesn't look awkward like this. So you saw it looked a little weird whenever the arm just kind of bent straight out on an angle, but the upper body itself didn't move. So we're going to go ahead and adjust that clavicle so that looks correct. And there we go. So you see that instead of being concave here like the left arm still is, the right arm kind of popped the chest area back out. However, if you zoom in, you see it still looks a little tweaked. You'll see they all come sharply into a single point, and it still looks kind of awkward. It's because the arm itself is flipped palm up instead of palm down. So we want to go ahead and use the x-axis 180 degrees, so that's a full half turn. So we're going to rotate it around the x-axis here 180 degrees, and okay, don't want the x-axis, we want the z-axis. So instead of rotating it around this way, that's the z-axis. I mixed that up. It was rotating it around from this axis, which is the x. So the half turn moved it over here instead of just swiveling it around this way. So that's why you kind of have to get used to what each axis means. So in this case, the x-axis is, if you're looking top down, the degree of rotation around the center point looking from the top. The y-axis is, if you're looking from the front of the model, what degree of rotation it is around that center point from the front. So in this case, 90, 180, 270, 360. Or again, 0 point, negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, and negative 360, because, like I said, the negative or positive, it all just adds up to 360 here. So we're going to go ahead and apply this rotation that I made for, like I said, the z-axis to get it to flip palm down. And you'll see the thumb's stuck up through the palm. So it's not that the thumb is up because the palm is up, it's that the thumb is up because the model has the thumb just literally going through the palm. One of the major things you want to do whenever doing a model edit like this is to try to keep clipping to a minimum. And clipping is whenever you have instances where one surface of an object contacts another surface of an object and goes through it, and kind of covers up part of the object. Like, you'll see we actually can't see the base of the thumb because the base of the thumb has shoved itself up through the palm. It's clipped through the palm. So we're actually missing some of the texture that we can't see because it's hidden within the palm. So a little bit later, we're going to get to adjusting that. We're going to kind of separate reposition the palm and fingers a little bit better, especially the thumb, get it facing correctly. But for now, since we're on the arms, we're just going to get that out of the way. So back on the left arm. Now, once again, we're going to zero out the upper arm so it points straight to where it's supposed to. We're going to left the arm clavicle, rotate it 90 degrees. Actually, we want to do negative 90 because as we saw whenever we rotated the right arm, looking from the front, it's 0 degree top, 90 degree to the left, 180 down, and 270 to the right. Since we want this arm to go to stage right, screen right here, we actually want to either do 270 degrees rotation or negative 90, just so it does that quarter turn in this direction. And once again, I did the upper arm instead of the clavicle because I am not paying attention. 270. Okay. And again, with the way the right arm did, whenever we were working on it, you'll see that the arm itself is still kind of like narrowing back to a single point here, and it looks awkward. There are pieces still clipping through each other. So we have to do that 180 degree rotation to get it to flip, pivot around. And there we go. So the arms are kind of pointed out in a classic T-pose here, which for now is okay, but we're actually going to want to later adjust it to a, I don't know the technical term for it, but I call it just kind of like a slouching T-pose, where the arms kind of come down at a slight angle. So again, as I explained earlier, the muscle structure will appear correctly to what it was supposed to whenever this model was originally being created. But for now, we have slightly bigger fish to fry. Since the chest cavity is where it's supposed to be, we now have the issue with Ovon's head and his shoulder guard stuck in it. So we're going to go ahead to adjust those next. So we're going to adjust the Z positioning of the whole main model itself. We're going to put it down a couple more points, which is going to sink the head down in a little bit. So we get a better, we can zoom in a bit better, and whenever we get it flipped upright, we'll actually be able to zoom and see things from the inside of the head, which will help whenever we do adjustments to the eyes and the hair. Okay, I'm doing a lot of over-explaining, so if there's anything here, if any of you guys in chat need more details, or if I went over anything too quickly, again, let me know. Even if you come back to the stream later and see it, send me a message. I'll come back and cover anything in more detail. Maybe do an individual upload on YouTube or something for anything that might need clarified. Okay, so here, one second. So under the neck option here, so we were working on the clavicles earlier, but we're done with the left and right clavicle for now. We now have the head, which is the face, the hair, that sort of thing. The sode, which is his arm piece, and the muff or muffler, which is his scarf. You'll see a lot of times they use some Japanese terminology with these models. It's mostly English, which is surprising considering this is a Japanese game. I expected a lot more to be in Japanese terms, but they left some of the stuff in Japanese, but most of it left in English. So like the sode is a Japanese term for, I believe, like an arm guard. In Western culture, we would probably refer to it as a pauldron. So it's just kind of like armoring for the shoulder, upper arm shoulder area. Like you see a lot of knights will have those like big metal fittings on their shoulders to protect the shoulder joint. This was, the sode was kind of a similar thing in Japanese armor back in the day. It's just, again, using the Japanese term instead of the English, but it's essentially the same thing. So just for the sake of getting that sode out of the way, that arm guard out of the way, let's go ahead and rotate this first. So this one's going to be complicated because it twists oddly. If you actually look at reference photos for Ovon's arm, which I don't think I can pull up because there's a severe shortage of screenshots of characters like this because the dotHack games just are super popular, so it's hard to find good images like this. But if you actually see his in-game model, which I might pop open the game itself here a little bit later for reference, but you'll see the arm guard kind of comes up and then it swoops down and kind of pokes out at the front. So we kind of have to adjust it to get it to wrap around the arm without touching, without clipping, so it doesn't mess up the model. So we'll have to adjust that later, but for now, it's clipping inside the body. That's fine. I just wanted it out of the way while we're working on the face. We'll come back and adjust it properly later. So we're going to go ahead up to the head now. The main head itself, we don't want to adjust because the neck and upper shoulder area is in the correct positioning. It's just everything, his hair, his face, and his eyes aren't. So that since the neck is where it needs to be, we're going to leave the head base itself where it is because we don't want to screw that up. Even though everything else is flipped upside down, it makes the model look better and more accurate if we actually take the time to, instead of doing one adjustment of, say, flipping the head to 180 and getting the face up and the hair and everything, you'll actually see that the neck itself contorted itself, and it's kind of concave and clipping, and it is actually a big chunk missing from his chin back. So to keep that from happening, that's why we have to leave the neck where it is and then adjust each of the individual pieces from the neck up. So we're going to go ahead and do the face first. So it's negative 90 degrees Y rotation and negative 180. So as I said before, negative and positive are just different degrees, just whether you rotate left or rotate right on a degree. Since 180 is the direct center point, actually taking out that negative and making it just 180 is going to make it exactly the same position. It's in the same spot, whether you have it negative or positive 180, that is the halfway mark, and it is always going to look identical. The negative 90, however, means it's tilting, in this case, counterclockwise, a quarter of the rotation. So if we put that back to 0, instead of putting the head upright, it's going to be pointing to the right. The face, rather, is going to be pointing to the right. So that's the default position for the face. We actually want to go ahead and put that at a positive 90 degrees to get it to look upright. And that is going to be the positioning for most of these pieces. We're going to put it 90 degrees Y instead of negative 90, which is their default. And just for the sake of appearance, I'm going to change all the x-axis rotations to 180 degrees instead of negative 180, just because I like it better that way. No functional difference. Any other program that reads the model is going to see it exactly the same. I just prefer it that way. That's just all there is to it. So since we got the face in the upright position, you will notice if you look closely at the neck itself, you'll see where the face section joins the neck section, there's this gap. Just from the way that they positioned it all, we're going to attempt to get rid of that gap as much as possible. So you'll see as it gets closer to the chin, that gap narrows and closes up completely. The closer to the back of the neck, you'll see the wider the gap gets. And if you noticed, whenever we took the neck, whenever we were looking at the neck piece by itself, there's this little hook just where it joins the jawline. So you'll see if we put the face back, it kind of clips into that hook on the neck. So what we're going to do is just ever so slightly rotate the face to try to get it to close that gap towards the back while leaving it in position at the front. So I believe that is going to be adjusting the Y, or the X-axis rather, which should be the forward and backward rotation. Wait, no, sorry. X is from above, so that would be the rotation here. So if we adjust this to 90, he'll face right. Okay. Oops, 180. So what we actually want to adjust is that Z-axis, which is the side rotation here. So just to see which direction we're going with it, we're going to go throw in 5. 5 degrees is significant for a little adjustment like this. So it's going to make the gap either disappear completely and then cause the face to clip too much, or it's going to cause a huge gap to make the face too far away. So we'll check it here to see where that goes, and yep, it moved the face too far away. So now we know that we want to go negative on the Z-axis. But not quite as extreme as 5. So we're going to start with a negative 1 degree rotation. And you'll see, while that did get it to join completely at the back, that also caused the chin to pop up where we don't want it to. So we're going to scale down that 1 degree rotation, which even 1 degree is extreme, it seems, in this case. So we're going to tune that down to half a degree rotation, and you'll see the gap at the back of the neck has closed. The gap of the chin is almost closed again, but we still have that gap in the middle here. So what that means is whenever they created the model for the game, they never closed this gap properly. They had the actual face and neck clipping together. Otherwise, we wouldn't be seeing this kind of overlapping on our side here. So what we're instead, well, not instead, but also going to do is we're going to actually adjust the X positioning. So we're going to, like we did with the whole body itself, whenever we moved it down to get a better look at the face by moving it closer to the center point, we're actually going to move the face itself down just a smidge. And we're going to do the same with the eyes and the hair and the glasses that Ovan has, because he is a character that has glasses. So we're going to adjust those slightly down as well. So compared to the rest of the body, it sinks in a little bit, and that will close up the gap in the neck here. It is going to cause the model to clip slightly. But in cases like this, it's preferable to have a very marginal overlapping of the model pieces than to have a gap, because the gap just looks sloppy, and in a lot of cases, the models are made to overlap slightly to make it look natural and correct. So we don't really have to worry about that messing up the model at all. So here you'll see the positioning for the face in the actual positioning scale looks a little different. So it looks like there's some high numbers on the positioning, full ones and twos, but you'll see that they have these E minus. So what this says is from the center point on the body, move it -1 point. Whatever the measurement that ends up being, and then that E. I don't 100% know what this E means, but it's a shorthand to say, and then move it in the opposite direction, another 13 points on whatever scale this uses. So for all of these, you'll see if we zero this out, it stays in the exact same position. Because whatever math that equals out to, that negative, in this case it was -1.077 blah blah blah, is the same as that offset E minus 13. For example, a better way to see this would be if we would take off that E minus 13 offset and then apply it, you'll see the head itself will just kind of disappear. So that means it moved 1 full point, and in this case it moved it down. Since it was a -1 point, without that offset it moved the face itself down, and in this case half the length of his body. So it's between his knees here. So we're going to go ahead and zero that out altogether, which again is going to undo the move and the offset and put it back up to where it originally was. And let's see here. Sorry, I was just checking something real quick. Stream's still looking okay. All right. And now we are actually going to do the same for the Y positioning, which is the left and right, and you'll see it might have shifted just a minimal amount whenever we did it, and in fact it's pretty much imperceptible, so that was evened out as well. The one where we're going to see it move a little bit is the Z. Usually this adjusts it not much, but a smidge. So we're going to zero this out, and I'm probably going to end up putting it back. Well, nope. It looks like in the case of this particular model, the math on the Z and the offset was still equal as well. So that's good. So that means we have these numbers zeroed out, so they are very clear and concise to read, no confusion. And what we're going to do is that X position, we are going to move it ever so slightly down. Actually, you know what, I actually think it's the, no, it is the X position. We just demonstrated that earlier. So if we move it a full point down, we're going to see, like we experimented with earlier, it's going to move it the whole way down between his knees there. We don't want it down that far, so we're going to use decimals of numbers, so just fractions of fractions here. We're going to start with a 0.01. So we're going to move it 1/100th of a measurement unit down, and you'll see even that is a lot farther down than we wanted to adjust. So instead of 1/100th, we'll try 1/1000th. And you'll see that actually ends up being a significant move as well, and again is still too much since the neck has closed on the bottom, but that actually pulled it too far away from the top of this hook where it was seated properly earlier. So we're going to go ahead and scale it down one more time to 1/10,000th of a movement position. And you'll see that puts us essentially back to where we were, except for it's closed up the chin gap ever so slightly. So that is the lowest significant movement, the lowest significant measurement we're going to want to use to try to adjust this. And that is, whenever you're doing these model adjustments, that is what you want to aim for before you make any changes, is you want to find the smallest significant change here. So if we would put in another zero, another leading zero, and make this 1/100,000th of a move, you'll see that'll put the neck up back essentially where it was, where we can see the gap going the whole way down the chin line. But if we move this up to 0.5, you'll see that barely moves. It's imperceptible measurement, even though we made it 5 times larger than what it was originally. And that means that that measurement is just way too small. Any change we make on this scale is not going to be significant enough. So we want to go back to where we were, 1/10,000th of a movement point. And that, again, almost entirely closes up the neck, but doesn't do it enough. So we're going to move that to 2/10,000th. And you'll see that closed up the chin perfectly, almost. Okay. Here you're going to see another piece as well. So this is something else where, even though looking at it from a front, it looks like the neck is, the front of the chin is sealed properly now. If you look at it from above, you'll see there is still that gap there, which means as much as we are moving it down to mesh with the neck, we are also likely going to want to move it back, back towards his back a little bit as well. Honestly, this probably doesn't matter very much because the face has a slight overhang to the neck. That should be all right. That's going to look fine whenever we see this model in game. However, if you're a little bit of a perfectionist like I am and just want it to look as accurate as possible, you're going to want to try to line it up as close as you can without any overlap. So we're going to focus on adjusting the vertical position, and then I'm going to go ahead and adjust after that the forward to back position. All right, so we moved it 2/10,000ths of a move down. We're going to move that up to 3, which closes the gap a little more. It's going to end up probably looking good at 5, but we're going to do 4 next, and then 5. And you'll see at 5 there is just the tiniest little gap at a couple of corners here. So we're going to go ahead and move it to 6 as well. Again, we would prefer to see a slight overlap than a slight gap. However, moving it to that 0.06, you see we have a new issue. At the top, where it was meshing fine earlier, there's now a gap. So if we move it back down to 0.005, sorry, 0.0005, it should close up that gap better, but not imperceptibly. And here's where we're going to run into a major roadblock. Well, minor roadblock. It is practically impossible to get these to line up perfectly because, as I said earlier, whenever these models were being created, they didn't put in the effort to actually get them to join properly. So we're pretty much working with what we can at this point, and we're going to want to make it look as close to properly meshed as we possibly can without too many gaps. So if we move the face down a bit, it is going to close up that gap that we saw at the sides of the neck at that one little corner, but it's going to make the gap at the top of the neck even bigger, which we don't want. So we gotta, it's a balancing act to try to close what gaps you can without opening up others. And in fact, since we're going to be moving the face backward, that might help to close up these gaps in the upper spot. So it's going to kind of push that wedge shape back further into the notch. So we're going to go ahead and use the same scale here. We're going to move the Y positioning on this face. Make sure we're doing it properly. We're just going to set it at a full 1 and see where the face moves, and it moves forward. So Again, we found the right scale. We're going to go negative instead of positive to make it go backwards instead of forwards. And we're going to go ahead and use that same measurement we used, 0.0005. And voila. That closed up the gaps from the side perfectly. So both the gap we had at the top of the neck and the gap we had at the side of the neck has disappeared. Chin gap's gone as well. And on top of that, looking from above, you'll see that the gaps that were pretty prevalent have almost entirely sealed up. Again, at the corner, there is this little bit of overhang where the face is overhanging the neck, but that's fine. That will actually look perfectly fine from the model. It's better to have an overhang on the face than an overhang on the neck. Or rather, it's better to have the face overhang the neck than the neck to overhang the face, just because the way it textures together, it looks more correct that way. Something else I'm kind of curious about here. Let's go ahead and we adjusted the Z rotation on the face and then went ahead and closed up the gaps by moving the model itself. Let's go ahead and set that back to 0 just to see if that makes any significant difference here. And it looks like no, it's about the same. So we have that, still have the slight overhang of the face over the neck. The gaps are mostly closed up still, almost imperceptible, and in fact, once we get the hair on, you're not even going to notice these small gaps at the corners here, especially in game. So it looks like we didn't need to rotate it back after all to compensate for the openings in the side of the neck here. So we're just going to go ahead and leave it at a 0-degree rotation. We want to minimize the number of rotations if at all possible. We don't want to rotate it any more than we have to get the desired visual effect, because that's just more complications and throws more monkeys into the mix that we don't really need to bother with. But the upside is, since we have the face at its proper positioning as close as we're able to get it, we can now copy all of these settings exactly as is for the left eye, the right eye, the hair, and these SGS, which is going to be the glasses. I finally remembered what it was. The SGS is glasses. I don't know what the exact abbreviation they're using is, but that's what it is here. Sunglasses. That's probably what it is, sunglasses. But yeah, since they were all clumped together and positioned together where the face originally was, all these numbers are going to rotate all of these pieces to exactly where we want them to line up properly with where the face was, where the face is now. So all of them are going to have an X and Y of negative 0.0005. The X rotation is going to be 180, and the Y rotation is going to be 90. So we'll go ahead and do this. We're going to pop in the left eye, 180 and 90, and no perceptible change. There's a reason for that. This is another piece that we're going to have to go back and fix later. And we're actually going to have to fix this in Blender. Once we export this, once we finish getting the structure lined up properly, there are some additional steps we need to do in some other applications to get the model to appear as appropriate as possible for it to be used in different applications for the model to appear correctly. So with the way that they created the face structure on these models, the eyes are actually an opaque covering that just look clear. So like if we rotate the head down, you can see through the eye and actually see the grid line scale for the Studio CSS application itself. But the secret is that those aren't actually transparent. They are just masked to look transparent. And if we rotate his head around, you'll see his eye that we positioned is in the correct space. We just can't see it from where it is. And in fact, if we positioned it, let's say we moved it forward to 0.5, you'll see it'll pop up. Nope, wrong measurement. The Y, the 0.5. You'll see it will pop forward. There. Way farther than I expected. So yes, we can see the front of the eye. It's not a transparent texture on the eye or anything like that. It's functioning correctly. It's just that there is that mask on the eye hole in the face. So we're actually going to have to, whenever we pull the model into Blender itself, we're actually going to have to edit the model and select each one of those faces around the eye, and we're just going to delete them out. So you'll be able to see the eyeball, I guess, itself through it, or at least the eye texture through it properly. But for now, nothing we can do for it in CSS Studio. We just need to make sure the eye is where it needs to be, and we'll fix it later in Blender. So once again, we're going to do the same with the left eye, or I'm sorry, the right eye. 180-degree rotation on the x-axis, 90 on the y-axis, and we'll see it will pop in here once I apply. And you'll actually see here the eye itself has managed to clip into that facing on his face piece, that transparent eye structure, as it were. You'll see it's actually clipping through the eye. The models have clipped together here, and you'll see the eye is sticking out a little bit. That's fine. That's what we want, essentially. Well, not what we want, but it's in the proper position, and for the moment isn't going to hurt anything. Actually move that to 0. That's probably what did it. Ah, yes, I accidentally moved the eye to the side ever so slightly. It caused it to clip because I didn't realize I had changed the Z positioning as well. So we're going to do the same for the sunglasses. Paste in that 0005 for the X and Y. X rotation 180, Y rotation 90. And you'll see the glasses. The frame of the glasses popped up, and then it has a left lens and a right lens because of the way that they've done it. Okay. I don't know why they did this for the sunglasses, that they actually did separate pieces for all of it. I'd assume it has something to do with the way it's textured. They probably couldn't get the detail of where the arms overlap the glasses without making them separate pieces with separate texture files. At least that's my guess. I don't know 100% for sure. We're going to do 180 and 90. Okay, so the glasses are in proper position. We have the eyes in proper position, the face in proper position, and we're going to go ahead and do the hair. So the hair, honestly, is usually the biggest trouble with any of these models, because on a lot of them, in order to get a lot of definition and a lot of detail for the model, they have separate clumps and strands of hair that each have their own structure to it, their own bone, as they call it, so that they can be positioned and maneuvered around in a cutscene. Like if they kick up wind, they can cause the hair to kind of blow a little bit to make it look a little more realistic. Looks nice in cutscenes means that every model you export, you have to make sure the hair is lined up in such a way where it looks accurate to where it should be on the model without also clipping the model, which if you know anything about hair, it sits pretty much on top of itself all the time. There's, even in real life, almost cases of clipping if that would be physically possible. So that means it's a real chore to actually get it to position correctly in a model export, without, again, causing clipping issues. So we're going to split open the hair object here, and there are 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, 12 separate pieces if we count the basic hair structure, but 11 individual clumps and strands that we have to make sure we position and rotate properly, and if at all possible, do not directly interfere with each other. This is easily the most time-consuming part of any model adjustment from CSS Studio. And yeah. So for this part, I'm probably not going to be doing as much talking as much as trying to concentrate, because it's very, very fiddly. And you just got to do what you got to do with it. So let's see here. So like I did on the others, I'm gonna, or rather what I like to do to begin with a lot of these models is I'm gonna zero out, like I did with the Soda. I'm going to zero out where the hair is itself to make it go back to its default position, and then I'll just rotate as necessary until I get it looking close to what I like, or close to what I want it to look at like. So let's see here. X position. Okay, so we want to do -90 here to get it to poke out to the side. The hair itself is rotated properly around its base, so then we just need to make it lay flat. So we're going to do 90 here, which is probably too much. -90, which is too much. And you'll see it is actually clipping into the ear a bit. We're actually going to, so one of two ways you could do it. Either one, since it's still sticking out a little bit, you could just shove it down, make it go closer to the side of the head, but it's going to clip the hair worse. Or in this case, we're actually going to position it out a little bit, so we're going to attempt to make it not clip the ear at all if possible. So we're going to back it out to 85, and you'll see that causes just the littlest gap between the ear and the hairpiece, but that is fine. As long as they're not directly touching, anybody who picks up this model later, since they're separate pieces, can position the hair however they need without worrying about bending or pulling the ear, like what we saw when the model was first imported. I had explained how the upper body was kind of mangled and misproportioned and everything because the arms were in the wrong spot. It was pulling at each of the other pieces it was attached to and causing them to distort. So that's why you want each of the individual pieces to try to remain separate if at all possible, because if you export a model and the hair is clipping the ear, if somebody comes in later and tries to move the hair so it doesn't clip the ear, it's going to be attached to the ear and it's going to pull the ear with it. Honestly, that isn't 100% accurate in this situation, since the face is a separate piece to the hair. It can be moved without having to worry about them clipping. Literally, somebody can come in later, since the face is going to permanently stay a separate piece. They can come in and say, oh, I want the face out of the way while I do what I want with the hair. They'll put 5 here for the face, move it out of the way, adjust the hair and eyes and glasses however they want, and they'll plug the face back into where it is supposed to be, and it'll be fine. However, it's important to work on practicing, looking to make sure that no overlaps, no clipping occur when possible, so you don't get lazy whenever it comes to other pieces where that isn't an option, like with scarves or with skirtings or leg pieces or arms or ropes, robes, belts, all that kind of stuff. You'll see that on any of these kinds of characters, and it's the same whether you're exporting models from dotHack, whether you're exporting models from Halo, whether you're exporting models from any video game out there under the sun. They all work on the same principles with bones and structuring. So if this is something that you're going to work on and be serious about it, you'll want to pay attention to clipping and avoid it if at all possible, in any cases possible. Even if it seems like in a case like this it's not going to matter, it's insignificant because those pieces are separate and can be adjusted separately, it's still best practice to get yourself used to having to work around that stipulation. But anyway, so I adjusted this hairpiece that I was looking at here out ever so slightly. It's not touching the ear. And it's almost in the exact position we want it. The only other thing we probably want to do is actually rotate it backwards a little bit, because you see there is the rest of the hair has like these smooth angles to it. It falls straight, and then there's like it clumps in, but it doesn't have these harsh jagged angles like you see here and here, because this is the same hairpiece. So we're going to want to rotate it backwards slightly to make that angle less severe and less significant and make it look more natural. So in order to do that, we are going to probably want to change the Y rotation. So let's go ahead and do a 5-degree angle, and you'll see that that does adjust it backward a little bit. We're just going to be working in larger numbers than we did in some of these other pieces. And you know what? I'm apparently wrong. So it looks like the Y was rotate around this way, which we don't want. So, interesting thing then, since I move this from -90 to -85 to get the ear to not clip, we actually want to move that back to 90 because that was the back and forth. We want to make this a -5% to get it to actually pop out away from the ear. And then we're going to rotate this by going, let's see here. So let's say we want to do -45 instead of 90. Okay. So this is one of the interesting issues we run into with these models, and that's that whenever you look at a section that's on a curved surface or on a slant or something that doesn't follow the exact grid lines, you're going to notice the rotations working a little oddly. So say, okay, so I go back to 90 degrees because I had it move from up, from sticking out to the side down with that 90 degree. If I move this rotation for the Y, it's also going to make it stick out. But it's going to make it stick out and back as opposed to out and forward. Or maybe it's just going to stick straight out regardless. This is finicky. Since this model's on an angle, or rather this section of the model is on an angle, it does things weird. That's about all I can really say about it here. It does things weird, and you got to kind of try to work around that. So you see both the both the Y and the Z axis cause the hair to stick out to the side instead of one being a rotation looking from top and one being rotation when looking from front. They're both rotation from looking from front, just because of the way that the structure works here. So let's see here. So this is going to be tricky. So the -90 rotation, so that did back and forth. Okay. Alright, and see that clip's even worse here. What if we do this? That just causes it to rise again. Okay, I guess we're going to be using this rotation here. So let's see, we're going to be doing, let's try 80, -80. Okay, so -80, you see the line isn't quite as bad. You usually want to work in even splits. So if a 90 degree angle, which is a quarter, 90 degree doesn't work because that's too extreme, trim down to 45. 45 doesn't work because in this case it's too far backward. We go, well, what's halfway between 45 and 90? In this case we'd have to, it's not exactly even, we got to split into thirds. So you can split 45 out evenly to 15 degree increments, as opposed to if you tried to split it in half, you would get some odd increment here. Okay, so what we're going to want to do here is use even angle increments if at all possible because they look better. So since 90 was too extreme forward, 45 is too extreme backward, we're going to go ahead and start again at 90 going down by 15 degree intervals. So down from 90 is going to be 75, down from 75 would be 60, and then down from 60 would again be 45. So we're just going to do one of those at a time, and we'll see here. That actually looks pretty good. So the hair is coming at an even angle with the way it should. This hair is part of the base structure, so we can't do anything about that, but we've at least got this hair looking more natural and coming down a little more clearly. So we're going to leave that as it is. It depends on what you want to do here. From here you can easily go for consistency and say, oh, since those two other strands of hair right behind it are at the same kind of extreme angle, just put it at 90 degrees. It'll line up, it'll look fine, but that's one of those things where, again, if at all possible, I'd rather try to avoid any extreme angles because they look awkward and incorrect. If somebody comes in later and modifies the model itself and they want that hair to be, so let's say the in-game model looks exactly like this with the hair down at that same extreme angle. If they want to come back later and when they're working with the model and say, I want it to look exactly like it does in the game, they can bend it around that same angle and same curve a lot easier than they can unbend it from the export. So it's better to try to get things as straight and as proper looking as possible, and then if somebody wants to change that later, it's easier for them to do to reverse what we did instead of, like I said, taking the raw export and trying to unkink it. It's easier for them to take the unkinked model and try to kink the hair. So we're gonna do it as is here, and you'll also see that since moving it backward got it to separate from the ear, we no longer have to worry about the ear clipping, so we don't have to adjust the model any further from what it was before. Since it's pivoting around that same section, it's not clipping the hair any more than it was before, so we're good. We don't need to kind of modify it any further. So that was that hair piece, and like I said, the hair is a pain in the butt because we did one of a dozen. So we got to go back, and now we're going to work on hair piece 19 instead of hair piece 21. So again, we're going to go ahead and zero out the rotation values, and we're going to have it sticking out here at a weird spot. We're going to rotate it 90 degrees on the x-axis, which should get it to point negative 90 degrees, which will get it to point out to the side of the hair. And you'll see this is actually a really good example of what I had mentioned earlier about stretching models. So since this hair is sticking out to the side and it is joined to a hair piece just with the way the model is structured, you'll see instead of having a clean break, it is actually yanking that part of the main hair model up with it. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid. This is the kind of thing that will happen if you have a piece clipping. If you have like strands of hair clipping and you try, and somebody takes the model later and tries to separate the hair clumps, you'll see this stretching between them, and you don't want that. It looks messy, it looks clumsy, and it's really hard to fix and takes a lot of time and effort to fix. So that's why you want to try to avoid clipping if possible. In this instance, the clipping is built into the hairpiece. This is just the way this was structured. We can't do anything about it here. So we just want to mitigate this stretching as much as possible and try to get the hair positioned in such a place where the stretching, if possible, just goes away entirely, which we've done. That was all we needed. Was to do another 90-degree angle. The hair flattened back down to this section here where it was stretching it before. So if we do like 80, you'll see that's the exact spot right here is right where it's stretching from. Bam. It's just taking that joint and just yanking at it. And again, we don't want that. So we're putting that back to 90 degrees. And you'll see that the hair is not clipping anything that it wasn't clipping before. It's not pulling oddly. It looks pretty good as far as the angles of the hair when comparing to everything else. We can probably try to adjust it backwards a little bit, so we can take that original -90 on the x-axis, cut it back to like say 85 or 80. That's going to get it to straighten out a little bit, and we don't want to do much farther because we don't want it to clip the ear if possible. But let's see how it looks at 80, and that would be all the farther I'd want to clip it or want to tweak it, but that looks pretty good, except one thing, that's actually pulling that clipping piece on the hairline itself back a little bit. So let's put that back to 85 and you'll see that shift as well. Okay, so that's back in what looks to be its normal position, because when it's stretched, you can actually see the line of hair where it has this like nice angle to it. You'll see it kind of pull backward here. So yeah, we don't want that. So 85 degree is going to be about where we want it. So bam. Okay. All right, so that's kind of a good breakdown of hair, how this hair actually works and how it looks and everything. I'm going to take a quick break from the stream here. It's been exactly a couple minutes over an hour since I started here. We got a good breakdown of how a lot of the structuring works and how some of the things to watch out for when structuring. I'm going to pick back up here in a couple of minutes. I'm just going to take a quick break for myself here. So to anybody that might be watching, it says I have one viewer, but I honestly think that's just an automated bot or anything. But if there's actually somebody there, give me like 5 minutes and I will be right back for the stream. And like I said, if you're actually out there, thanks for joining me, and be right back. Alright, so we are back here with the stream. Still the same, maybe one person, probably just a bot viewing. But here we go here. Give me just one moment. Okay. So, we are going to pick up where we left off here. So, midway through... sorry, just trying to get stuff organized here a little bit. Midway through working on the hair here. So, we already got 2 of the strands kind of positioned properly here. Let's go ahead with number 3. Yeah. The nice part about this is... Ovon's hair is fairly straightforward and simple compared to so many of the other models I've done. Some of them it's super easy, like with Pi and Kun, where they essentially just had ponytails and pigtails, and it was just like 1 or 2 big strands put together and then just some bangs. Those were stupidly easy. Ovon's is kind of middle of the pack here. It's tough, but it's not obscenely tough. Whenever you get into some characters like Endurance, who has the long, flowy, really be shonen hair, oh my goodness. That took probably 3 hours just on his hair, maybe longer. But yeah, Obon has a bunch of hair nubs, but there isn't a whole lot to them, thankfully. So it's going to be just same process over and over again, zeroing out to get a default position, tweaking the rotation until we get something that looks decent, and going. The other nice part is that his hair comes in like 2 pieces. So for each one of these, there's like the main section, the upper section, and the lower section. For other characters, it can get layers upon layers of hair strands deep. Like if we take here, so the hair sticking out to the side on the main strand, if we take the second half strand here and do like a 90, it's gonna pivot like halfway up. Oop, not there. Here. And you see right at the halfway mark, it just pivots straight up in the air. We want to avoid that as much as possible. So we're not going to be really messing with the hair because the secondary parts, because we really don't need to. His hair is short and the strands work well, so we're just going to try to adjust them as much as we can. And I'm going to go close the window here because there was a lawnmower. Give me just one moment, please. Okay, should have gotten all this taken care of before I actually came back to the mic, but oh well. Alright, so like we saw on the strand on the other side, it kind of comes down the flow and then it kinks kind of suddenly, so we're going to try to rotate it back a bit. So I think 85, no, that was 75. 15 down from 90. You'll see the flow and angle of the hair is perfect. It comes straight out. It is clipping the... Oh, nope. No, it's not. This is why you always got to look around at the angles, because this stuff can get very complex. But you see here, the hair actually is not clipping with the ear. They come very close, but they are not... They come very close, but they are not touching. So that is perfect. That's basically where we want it, because the hair is in its optimal position, but it's not obstructing any movement on it later. So let's see here. Next hair piece is over here. -90, 90, and okay. Now here's where we're gonna run into another one of the bigger issues that thankfully we haven't run into much with the Ophlon yet, but you'll see viewing it from the side looks perfectly fine. It looks angled pretty well, but whenever you turn it, you'll see this big kink in the positioning of the hair. This is a pain to try to figure out because there's all kinds of things that can cause these little kinks to happen. So you pretty much just gotta start messing with numbers and see what looks good. So we're gonna zero this out, 90 here. -90 rather. Okay, so pretty much the way this is working is the hair itself is naturally supposed to come in here and pretty much hug the side of his face, but we don't want it to clip the side of the face. So we gotta get it, leave it out at a little bit of an angle, however that's now causing stretch. So the key is gonna be figuring the best number to keep the stretch from getting too crazy, but also, again, without the face clipping, if possible. Okay, so let's see here. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. Let's do 95. Let's do 100. I just don't like the way it, like, even as we're narrowing this angle here, there's still this kink, which means we're probably, unfortunately, going to have to go to the child piece here and actually adjust something there, which I didn't want to have to do, but with the way the hair is stretching, it looks like it's gonna be necessary. So let's do 20 here, and you'll see that that kind of, okay, that is the rotation. So we don't want to rotate, or swivel, twist, whatever you want to call it. So let's do this. That's going to cause it to, I think, curve backward, which we don't want to do. Last one then. And that gets it to curve outward instead of inward, which we actually might want because that actually contributes to better flow. Okay, so what was this one again? That was rotation in place. This is, okay. Let's say we do like -10 on this. What does that do? So that straightens out the hair. Okay, this is another complicated one where we're gonna have a little bit of trouble. So there are two strands of hair that are dictated by this one bone, this one structure, but they don't line up perfectly. So you'll see here we have the line and then the kink, and then here we have an almost straight flow down with a slight curve. So this looks nice, this is overly stretched. If we reverse it, you'll see this looks better. It isn't curved quite as bad, but this kinks backward now. So actually with the way it's pivoting around, it's probably going to be fine if we leave it at that 10 because it's down here where this red line is bisecting it is where the movement is, where the adjustment is happening, not farther up where the big curve is. So we probably actually want to keep this at -10 because it straightens out the hair for this strand, makes it look almost perfect. It straightens out from this section down and makes it look almost perfect, so that's good. Now a couple things here. We're going to want to go to, so this was 20. If we do 10, this is going to, so then it actually gets it to stick in more. How does this look from the front? 20 looks better because this curve, I'm sorry, this curve it gets this to straighten out a little bit more. Yeah, that looks a lot better. Alright, so oddly enough, opposing to what I said earlier, we're not going to be adjusting the second piece of hair. We're just going to adjust the main strand and try to get this looking as good as possible, which I think we're still going to have trouble with. So let's try to do a rotation here. No, that's right. The Y and the Z are just being stubborn and counteracting each other here. So that makes it very, very hard for us to straighten this out properly. Because everything I change on the Y, when I try to change on the X, it does the exact opposite. So the X and the Y is canceling each other out, and that is ridiculously frustrating. But, you know, what else can we do here? Let's try 120, and I'll get that to buckle in. And it's actually clipping the glasses and clipping the face, so we don't want it to be that extreme. Let's try 1 at 10. And I think that's as good as we're going to get it, except there's a little bit of clipping here, but I don't know if that's from our adjustment or not. No. A little bit. So let's just go ahead and, since we can't really adjust it to any point that's going to make it look good, we're just defaulting to something I said earlier, going to try to make it as good as we can with what we're working with. So we're going to leave it poking out here a bit, just to kind of keep portions of the strands looking good without it clipping. Leave it at a nice angle that lets anybody who comes in later work with it, and we're just not gonna, since we can't straighten out this kink that is the part that looks the worst about it, we're just gonna leave it as is. There's not really anything else we can do from here. Let's see here. Now we got a side of the head, other side of the head rather. 90. 90, negative 90. Okay, and that looks good. It's almost perfect. We're just going to do a little bit of, no, not here. We want to adjust that 90 to, let's say, 80, just to get it to back up a little bit. That actually causes it to clip the ear and does not straighten out the segment that I was hoping it would. I was hoping it would straighten out down here, so let's go to the sub part. Take it from 10 down to 0. Nope. That does farther down than I was hoping. That adjusts the line here instead of here. So we're going to leave this as is because that's the best we're going to deal with it. And it still looks fine. I'm going to be honest here, for anybody that's wondering about the music, I'm not entirely sure what's going on with it. I picked weird, doesn't do the same on here. So I did a playlist that was Ruby soundtrack. If you're familiar with that 3D animation from Rooster Teeth, I actually picked a song from the Ruby soundtrack and just kind of did a Google Play playlist off of it, and it's just kind of turned up some random stuff, which I'm fine with. I'm enjoying most of this so far, but I don't know any of these artists aside from whenever the Ruby stuff pops up. Alright, let's see here. So if we do 180, that points out forward. Alright, so here's another issue that we're going to run into. It's hair that is on an odd angle purposefully. So this is supposed to be the bit of hair that is going from the bangs to the side here, so it's at an even steeper angle than what we're seeing and is completely going across our guidelines, our grid lines. So that makes it very hard to adjust because it's still going to, it for whatever reason is trying to adjust by those grid lines. Honestly, I don't know how this works sometimes. Some stuff adheres exactly to grid lines, even whenever it's on an angle. Some stuff goes on an angle, even whenever it's synced up, lined up to the grid lines. I don't know. Best way, just plug in numbers until you start to get a handle on what looks correct. Okay. So we got the hair to go from here to here. And if we do 90 here, that causes it to rotate. Okay. Sure. We probably do want to do that rotation here eventually because it looks like it straightens out one of the pivot points. But until I see exactly what's going on with the hair, I don't want to mess with it. Okay. So we're getting close here. So now's the time to pivot it around, and that didn't do what I thought it was going to. Yeah, see, with stuff like this, all the rules are just completely out the window. It just wants to do what it wants to do. Kirby remix. I'm okay with that. Okay. Alright, so you'll see one of the reasons why I like lining up whatever area I'm working with on the clear center grid is in situations like this, I can actually zoom in far enough so we are inside Ovon's head and can actually see what's going on with these hair pieces whenever we adjust them, which is really neat and can help a ton depending on what exactly you're doing at any given time and how much it feels like just kind of obscuring from you. So for now we're going to leave that at 0 since all that is rotating it around its base point, which we don't need at the moment. Okay, 90 moved it from pointing straight back into his head and, well, straight back this way to now pointing up and down this way. So we want to do 180 on this. Probably actually want to end up being negative 90 altogether, which is a positive 270. Okay. So that's laying down pretty good, about where we want it more or less for now. Now we just need to swivel it around its base. Which it didn't feel like doing. Okay. There we go. And then usually whenever you're rotating, you want to, pivoting around the base, you want to do 180 degrees just because that's the most, tends to be the most accurate. Because usually whenever it pivots to like an entire halfway around its pivot point. And then just kind of scale it up from there until you get it exactly where you want it. Right now I'm trying to keep it, trying to see if rotating it will get it to stop clipping his glasses without having to put in any extra work on positioning aside from that. Just rotations. But it's rotated about as good as it's going to get, and it's still clipping or very, very close to clipping the glasses, so we're just going to try to find a way to rotate it to just kind of get it to space out to the side. There we go. Okay. So, information thrown out there. I was actually using this stream as a test for my bitrate to make sure that my computer, rather my internet connection, would hold up to streaming here, and it looks like it's doing pretty darn well. That's good. All right, so that means that I'm going to keep doing some streaming here in the future. Which is something I've been wanting to do for a very long time, is just do streaming stuff. I love streaming. I love being on camera and playing games, and hopefully having people following along and watching here. So this is at least a success of the test case here. Okay. Oh, Starbomb. So this is one band I'm actually aware of. So this is Aaron Hansen and Dan Avedon and Brian Wecht. So they are, two of the three of them at least, are pretty well known as the Game Grumps. That's Aaron and Danny. They did a band called Starbomb with Brian Wecht, who does guitars and drums and random crap in the band. Oh, what does Danny and Brian call their band? So they do music together and have for several years here, and pretty much all it is it's them two, and then they get Aaron in, and they're Starbomb whenever they have Aaron on, and it's pretty much all video game related music and rapping and stuff. But the actual band itself is. I keep wanting to say Sex Swing, but that's from Funhouse. They did a fake mockumentary about the mockumentary cartoon animation about a band, kind of like in the vein of This Is Spinal Tap, but more ridiculous. But yeah, they were called Sex Swing. So, what the hell is Dan's band named? I'm Googling, because that's going to bug me. Ninja Sex Party. That was it. Huh. Well, Dan's Wikipedia page has gotten filled out quite a bit. Okay. Sorry, I keep getting sidetracked here and there. That happens a lot on these streams. I'll either get on a certain train of thought and just kind of get stuck there, or something will just kind of like pop up that I'm curious about or interested in. And I'll kind of go off on little side tangents, but like at this point, I don't think that's that big of a deal. I've been doing the exact same process here for the last 45 minutes. You probably get it. This isn't really the interesting stuff. I'm just doing a full stream here because I want to do a full stream. Honestly, that's all there is to it. I just wanted to kind of stream the whole model export process so people that were curious about it could get a good idea of how it all works. We're still on stage 1, honestly. We haven't done the initial export yet, so haven't seen Blender, haven't seen 3ds Studio Max. There's a lot of pieces that go into this this whole process here, and I'm probably going to be I at least want to get this out of the way because I don't have any other models queued up yet to do any of the additional work pieces on, so I kind of got to get Ovon finished up so I have something to show off with the next couple of pieces. Okay, so it's looking like... okay, it's clipping into the hairpiece, the other hairpiece there. So let's see if we set this to 200. Okay, and not clipping, it was a stretched piece, so that actually makes me feel fine here. So I can set this back to 180 where it was. That's going to stretch back to normal. We're going to set this rotation to 0. Actually, we're going to leave that -10 because I think that follows the curvature of the forehead better if we leave it at -10. In fact, I might want to pump that up to 15. Okay, that looks good. That's about where I want that. So the thing is, once you get used to working on these models, the process goes just so much quicker. even doing what I've done already would have taken me hours before, but I've actually kind of gotten a handle on it, because I've done, like I said at the start of the stream, I've been doing this for a month and a half, 2 months now. I have gotten used to working on these models. I've gotten used to how the program works, all the little steps and things to watch out for. The first handful of models I did were a freaking mess. Thankfully, I had a couple of people in the community here. There is just a whole fairly big, not massive, but big enough community around doing stuff with dotHack franchise, and just trying to make it awesome. Just trying to make awesome stuff. There's a cluster of people that are using those VR applications out that are out right now, the VR live chat pseudo MMOs, and trying to turn those into dotHack, or making skin sets for dotHack, which is cool. There's another group of people that are using this Minecraft, of all dang things, application or mod to make dotHack in Minecraft, which I know most people see Minecraft and are familiar with it and think just, oh, it's big blocky style, it looks like crap, but kind of in its basest form, yes, but the mod community for Minecraft is insane and have come a very, very long way. There are mods out there where you can see these models exactly as is inside of Minecraft. I mean, I have seen it myself, even though I haven't personally used it. These people that I work with, that I do these model rips for, honestly, at this point, are part of the communities that are just doing some insane stuff with these models. So they've also been really good at giving me tips and pointers and making sure I'm doing everything right here, or as right as they can. But they've helped out a lot, and a lot of his heck, they made the tools and the process I'm going through here. I'm just the one implementing it and kind of like figuring out what works best for me, which is kind of what I'm showing off, is the little like tips and nitpicks and stuff that I've gotten good at with it. But none of this process was mine on my own. This is all stuff that I picked up from other people that have been doing it way before me. Oh boy. Okay. But I don't even know where I started going with that. I was saying something about the community that's working on it and everything. Yeah, they're doing lots of cool stuff. Like, I'm just kind of one of the workhorses here, but I'm taking a lot of enjoyment out of the work I'm doing. It's giving me something to focus on. Full disclosure, I have been out of a job here for several months at this point, but that has been 100% my doing. It's just because I couldn't hack the last job I was in and quit, and this has just been giving me something to focus on until I've been trying to like regain my energy and my composure and get ready to go back out job hunting. And it's been great for something to focus on and actually make me feel productive, and then I'm actually doing something for a change. So that's nice. And it's not just me throwing these out into a void, it's me working on something that other people are using. Like, I'm not just making these to make these, I'm making these because other people have a use for them, and they're going out and doing crazy stuff with it. Like, I'm, you know, putting in the sweat and the work and the just tediousness. That's I think the biggest thing is this is tedious work. I'm good at tedious work. That's something I can sit here and do models like these for hours and kind of get anal enough about them that I make sure that they look good, or as good as I can make them look, instead of just throwing out some sloppy, half-done piece of crap. I don't know the complicated stuff, I just know the model stuff to this point, and I'm good at it, and I can do it, so that's what I'm doing. That's pretty much all there is to it. Got a text message here. Alright, so we have the hair done, we have the face done, we have the eyes done, so this entire section is done except for one small issue. So you might notice here that there is a nice big spike just poking into the top of Ovon's head. So this is something I mentioned earlier, is that while working on these types of things, I put the arms at a relaxed T-pose instead of a strict T-pose. This is a strict T-pose with the arms jutting straight out to the side at a right angle to the body. With these kinds of work, the relaxed T-pose looks better for the muscle structure and helps with things like this. So we're going to de-spike Ovon's head here. We're going to go back to the clavicles that we were working on earlier, instead of adjusting the clavicles themselves. So the upper body part, the portion that the arms sit on, are actually exactly where we want them. So we're just going to go to the upper arm portion here itself, and we are going to put it down at a 45-degree angle to relax it a bit. And that pulls that spike out. Instead of making the arm one long tube, you can see whenever you properly position this, the what they call the bones, the underlying structure of the models kind of sit properly here, and now you can see definition to arm muscle and where it comes off of the shoulder. So it looks correct. It looks the way it was meant to look now. I'm probably not going to have to adjust this in and of itself because it all looks correct. The structure is right where it is, right where it's supposed to be. You have harsh right angles with little spikes coming off the opposing side, and then you have this big wicked circle, but it's all in correct position. It's positioned slightly behind the body. The hands themselves, on the right hand I'm going to have to go and adjust the fingers and thumbs and stuff, but on the left hand it's all one big coagulated clump, so we don't really have to mess with that. Like, even if I break out the upper arm, we're going to have the lower arm, the forearm, we're going to have the THAN00. I don't know what that's short for, but that's the big arm piece here, the big corruption. But we, like I said, don't really need to mess with that. If anything, I might straighten it a little bit, but I don't think that's necessary. So if we break down the forearm, we're going to see the hand. And if we break down the hand, that's normally where we see the cluster of fingers. But here we just have one finger, which is the pivot point where all of these, the blade, sword, dagger, whatever this happens to be, is sitting on. But there's no clipping that isn't supposed to be there. Everything's pointing the way it's supposed to. Its structure looks good, so we're not going to mess with any of this. Left arm is good where it is right now. So we're just going to forget about that, and we're going to do the right arm. Same thing, we're going to adjust down 45-degree angle just to get into a relaxed T-pose. The fingers and hands, however, are what we're going to work on next. As I said earlier, the thumb is poking up through the palm and coming out the top, which is super bad on for so many reasons. The other fingers look fine. A lot of times you'll get these models ready for export, and you'll see some of the fingers are like overlapping, crowed into each other, just look messy, but they're straight, they are separated and distinct from each other, which is great. So all we have to do is mess with the thumb. So the thumb is always finger 0. So we're gonna again put it back, like with the other stuff, put it back at 0 for all the rotation. Usually, almost always, the z-axis needs to be at a 90-degree rotation or a negative 90-degree rotation, just so it curves the way it's supposed to for the thumb. And then we also need to pull it out from the palm. So we're going to do negative 45, since it's kind of at an extreme angle here, and that puts it pretty much right where we want it. It's sticking forward, it's not overlapping anything, the structure of the thumb and the webbing looks good. So if, let's say we pulled that out to 55, you'll see it's gonna stretch out the webbing a little bit. That actually might be okay, except the fact that it's pulling it out too far. You'll see it's actually distorting the shape of the hand. If I could shift around, you know what, let's go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna actually shift around the model here, so that we can view the palm from an upward angle, and I can show you. So we're gonna, what's the best way to do this? Okay, so, all right. Okay. All right, so that's about where we want to go. Okay, so as you can see here, like I said, the thumb is now pulled out too far, and it looks stretched and awkward. If you'd like hold up your own thumb against that, you'd see it doesn't look quite right. So we're going to go ahead and reduce that 55-degree angle back down to 45, which is where I like it, and you'll see it's falling much more in line. It's not pulling any of the texture, so it's not stretching anything, nor is it really compressing it. You can see like the whole way into that wrap. Oop, back out a little bit. You can see that wrapping, we can see the whole of it going through there, so it hasn't overlapped any. It's actually going right around the pivot point or the connection point correctly where it's supposed to. It looks good in the structure, so that means our hands are done. Hands are done, arms are done, hair's done, glasses, face. We are good on the upper body, except for, I almost forgot, the sode and the scarf. So the scarf's going to be easy. You'll see there's like this harsh edge here. It kind of looks ripped off or something. That's because this scarf is supposed to be coming down the front here. It's just with the way the scarf is positioned, the length of it is pulled back, and again it's stretching the model, causing it to look not correctly angled. So we are going to set this muffler to 0 positioning, which is going to be here. Okay, and we're gonna tweak it until, okay, that looks good. It's in the proper position vertically. Now we need to pull it out a little bit so it doesn't clip into the body. Okay. We see that it's rotated around like a single small point, so we got to do that. Undo that. We do -10. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm just trying to get this. It's messy whenever you use. So one of the features, I guess, of Studio CSS is that you can kind of rotate, move the camera independently of the grid. And it's nice in some situations, but in others it's just really messy because then you have to try to realign it properly, and it just doesn't. It's really touchy. As you see, I'm just barely tapping the A and D to go left and right, and it's just flying right past his head. That's probably as close as I'm going to get it here. But anyway, let's go ahead and pull this up. So one of the things I was trying to look at here is you'll see that the scarf is kind of turned at an odd angle. It's the outer edge is kind of popped out more, and the inner edge is kind of dipping in and clipping. So we're gonna have to rotate that a little bit. Let's see, so the -10 pulled it out, so we want to do, let's say -15, pull a little bit farther away from the body, and gives us the ability to adjust a little bit. The 180-degree tweak is probably where we need it, so let's do 190 instead, and that's going to cause that outer edge to pop in more and the inner edge to pop out, and that's looking okay. Now, this is one of the instances where you can see the scarf is kind of awkwardly curved, and there's some odd breakpoints. We're going to want to actually adjust the sub points of the scarf and try to get it to kind of line up a little better. Again, overall, you want to make sure you get the scarf, things like this, like the scarf, as straight as possible and make it look as correct as possible, because it's much easier for people who are coming into the model later to bend it in a position they want than to bend it back from an incorrect position. So that's our job, is to make sure it looks as correct as possible out of the gate, so other people can adjust it later and do what they need to. Let's see here. So, okay. So you see whenever I had the Y angle here set to 90, it kind of bunches up the model a little bit right across from the shoulder, so we're going to drop it to 80, and that straightens out a little bit, and we're going to drop it to 75, and that's about as good as we want. Ooh, what music is this? I know this music. Oh, red versus blue. More Rooster Teeth music. Okay. Blood Gulch Blues. Okay. Alright, so we got the scarf in a good position, so it's attached at the chest there, so there's not really anything we can do about that. In fact, I can show that off if we take the muffler and rotate it to 90 degrees here. Oh, you know what? Nope, I stand corrected. So we want to try to get that kink out. Okay, that's okay. So here's one of the other things where this kink is just part of the model. With where the bone structure is, any moves we make are going to adjust too far away from that kink. It's not gonna adjust it. So if you want to get super complex, there is one thing you could do to potentially fix it, and that's adjust the defined position values. If we tweak these a little bit, we can actually move the model instead of around a pivot. We can just force where the main position of this bone is, which on the second piece here, you can see that blue square is, I don't necessarily want to call it a square, it's more of a diamond shape, but the way these are positioned, you see the top part, the slender kind of pyramid shape, is showing you the exact pivot point, the exact base of this portion of the scarf, and the stretch part is showing you which direction it's going, with the position values, where it's being pushed to and where it's clipping to its child object. So what we could do is we can just straight up adjust the positional value of here and move this square instead of from here straight up here. Not rotate it around this pivot point, but just move the entire pivot point itself up, which will cause this bone to try to straighten out to connect directly or straighter with this, and that's will make it look better, but it could also screw up some stuff, and it's a lot of work usually. Let's throw caution to the wind and give this a shot, actually. So let's try the X position. If we adjust the X position down to 0, we can always Control Z to undo it. So the X is left and right from its current position, so we don't want to mess with that too much, or at the moment at all. The Y is, it looks like the Y might be the up and down position we're looking for. Possibly. And Z is length. If you are ever adjusting pieces like this, you never want to adjust the length, if at all possible. That is the one thing that has pulled consistently well here, is it always knows the correct size and length of the objects. If you go tweaking that number, you are going to mess something up and cause it to not look correct. So you want to leave that at go. But we have our answer in that the Y positioning is the one we want to adjust. So we're going to move it to 1 just to see. All right. So that moves it down. So we don't want to use positive numbers. We want to use negative numbers. And we're going to use 0.0001. 1/10,000th. And you'll see that did actually move it up a bit from where it was, which I believe was 0.022. Okay, so that's not a significant enough move. So we're going to go up to hundredths. Hundredths, not quite there. What about tenths? Okay. And here's the other portion that I said you got to be wary of here. So I should have copied this number out before I made any adjustments to make sure I could put it back to where it was by default if I need to, which in the case like this, you can see I did move it up, but it still is kinked and doesn't look quite correct. So there's less that we can actually do at this point to actually try to fix it. So we tried adjusting the what's the word I'm looking for? Explicit position up, and it didn't really help. It's still leaving it kinked like that. So that means it's a combination of something with the rotation and other factors. So it was ballpark 0022, so we're going to put it back there, and then we are going to move this, we're going to rotate this back to where it was, which was, I believe, 45. $30. That's probably the closest we want to do. If we do 15, so the original reason we moved this out was to prove that it didn't clip the chest. But if I move back to 15, that's close enough. It's going to click. It's going to clip. So we want to move it out here. 20 might be okay. It's still too close to tell for sure. 25 is all right, but we're going to do 30. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Fingers hit the right number. 30. Okay. And that actually did help make that kink in the scarf much less profound. It did that in that you can see there's a concave kink here and a convex kink here. They're just a lot more subtle. It kind of balanced the two out. So that's looking decent from where we're looking here. So the scarf is fixed, head, arms, hair, glasses, and we're going to do the sode next. Okay. Alright, so 90, and 90. Okay. So this part's a little tricky, just finding exactly where this needs to be rotated. So it looks like this needs to be 180 to stretch it out. Okay. Yep. So that's about perfect for there. Next, let's do the 90 on the Y, negative 90, and that should... Okay. So this is close to the right position. As you can see, it's kind of cutting into the arm, and as I had said earlier when I initially positioned this, it kind of has a wavy design to it. So we're going to want to flip this up until it doesn't clip the arm and starts showing the curviness properly. This, honestly, is overkill. This is too far up. However, as we start to drop it back down, you'll see it's going to uncurve itself and flatten out in a way we don't want it. Or here you'll see there's a little bubble that's developing, and that bubble is going to keep pressing down and is going to go back into the arm and cause the clipping, which we don't want. So this is one of those ones where we're not going to get it to sit perfectly. Realistically, if we put this back to 90, this is where the tip is supposed to be positioned. It's supposed to look like this, except for there's supposed to be a much greater kind of groove here over the arm. But since the sode is a single piece and the bones aren't shaped properly to allow us to do this in this program, it has a big dip and divot here, which we don't want. So the only way to get it to look right is we are going to have to use, put it up at an extreme angle, and then it's going to make it look as correct as it can for what we have, and then anybody that comes in later to edit the model is just going to have to flatten it back out and just kind of twist it what they're going to be able to do in programs like Blender or Maya or other softwares, they are actually going to be able to just grab pieces from any pivot point they want and just kind of wrench it down to whatever position they want to. It's better if we make it as clean as possible off the bat, so they have to do less fiddly work on their end. It's much easier to unfiddly it here, but there are some instances where we just can't get around it, like this right here. This is as good as we can make this without causing any clipping or without exacerbating the issue with some of these lines and bumps that aren't displaying the way they're supposed to with the original model. So we're going to leave this as it is. And that pretty much finishes up the entire upper body. We are almost done, honestly. This is the upper body is the most time consuming when compared to the lower body. The lower body takes almost no time at all, 90% of the time. And you'll see here the only things we have to adjust are the leg and foot positioning and his little flurry cape thing here. We're going to start with the cape, so we're going to adjust this up a little bit just so we can see. Let's put this at 4. So you can see that it's kind of concave here. It's the cloak has put itself into a V around these 2 pivot points on either hip. So we're going to focus on the pivot points and try to un-V it as much as possible. So we're going to go to, this is going to be the tail. And the tail is going to be split. So there's going to be the main point, which is kind of like right around the butt here. You can just kind of barely see this piece. In fact, if we go into the model, we might be able to see it a little better. So that's pretty much where we're going to want to keep it. Since it's not symmetrical and not even, if we move that without any way to counterbalance it, it's going to make things look awkward and move in position awkward. So we're going to leave that alone and just focus on the positioning on the hips themselves. So we have the left tail here. Again, like everything else I've done so far, we're going to zero it out. And you see that actually throws the cloak up and kind of curves it in the opposite direction we wanted to go. So first things first, 180. We're just kind of trying to get it setting in the correct way. So we want it to come down backwards, like above his bum. So we're going to do, all right, -90. Or in this case, since I've been using negatives, we're going to do it the other way around. So we're going to do +270, which pretty much says instead of going counterclockwise down, we're going to go clockwise the whole way around. Or instead of going counterclockwise down, it's going to go clockwise the whole way around until it gets to 3/4 of its rotation. Then, since we want it to, we pretty much have it in this position, so we're going to see that it lines up correctly with the other one, which we are also going to put at the same position. And it is probably also going to be 270. Okay, and you see that little nick is a lot less. What we want to do here is go ahead and rotate it around it so we don't have to look under the model. It's just easier to see where it's pivoting here. Let's do 5 here. Okay, and you'll see it's shifting that V out a little bit. It's kind of flattening it out, which is good. Caleb Hiles, Wolf in Sheep's Clothing. Don't know this. It sounds a lot like Mayday Parade. This song sounds a lot like Mayday Parade. Anyway, maybe a little bit some other bands, but getting off the track. Okay, so it's probably going to be 15 degrees is going to be the adequate one. Okay, so you see it's actually bumping out a little bit and causing a little bow back here. That's fine. That's going to fix itself whenever we rotate this down. So we're going to want to get it closer to 180, but not quite at 180. So let's do 245. That's a 45-degree difference halfway between 180, and that isn't even close to right. So let's do 195. So that's 180 plus 15. Which again, a 15 is what? 1/4, 1/12 of a rotation. Which is as close as you can do it with 360 degree. Alright, and now we see the other issue here. Because the rotation, they're actually overlapping now because we don't have any of the Z rotation. So let's, let's undo the Y rotation was bowing it differently. We actually wanted to do the Z rotation instead of the Y. So let's do -15 on that rotation and +15 on this rotation. And there we go. The cloak isn't overlapping, and it's got a nice even bow to it. It's perfect. That is exactly where we want this. And now we just lastly have to adjust the legs, which is actually really easy. We again want to get as close to T-pose as possible. We're going to leave 180 and 180 on X and Z, because those are going to keep the legs pointing down and keep them rotated around their pivot point correctly. And we're going to take this 9 degrees down to 0 on both, just to see where that puts us. We want the legs to be close without clipping, and you will see that that actually clips the belts just barely. We're going to move each leg out to a 5-degree interval. If that's too extreme, we can do a 2.5. Those seem to be the sweet spot numbers anytime I do these rotations. Start at 5 degrees, and you'll see that looks like a fairly natural pose. We can do 2.5 just to see what it looks like in comparison, but I think we're probably going to stick with 5. Okay, actually 2.5 ain't bad. Isn't bad. 2.5 isn't bad. There's no clipping. It's as close to a T-pose as we're going to get, probably without a clipping, so we're going to leave it at that. Now, there is a little bit of complicated factor into the foot and leg work, and this is the last big portion here. We want to get the feet, the bottoms of the feet, as straight as possible and as close to these the 0 plane on these guidelines as possible. So we want the body to go up until the feet, the soles of the feet are just, excuse me, just barely touching the bottom here. That 1.05, not 1.5. Let's do 1.1, and it's going to be different for every model. Since every model, every character is a different size, it's always positioned so that their 0 point is in the dead center of their body. So that means there's going to be a different distance between the top of their head to their middle point, or to the bottom of the feet to their middle point. So this is always going to be different every time. There's never going to be one set number that is going to look correct. So you just kind of got to fiddle with these until you get the right height for each character. So here at 1.19, we are going to get a little too much, 8. Okay, so you'll see it's close, but it's not directly on the line. That's fine for right this moment. We are going to get this as close to a 0 point as possible. Now, I messed this up earlier whenever I was repositioning around to look at the top of the hand to show you how it looked. I moved the camera up and down on this plane, and that kind of caused it to not, I couldn't move it back to the exact position it started with, so we're going to get close but not perfect. So I'm not going to be able to look directly down, exactly down the plane, but we're going to get as close as I can to it, and this will do the job that we needed to do here. So we're going to go down. The calf we don't need to move. That's the lower leg area. It's fine where it is. We're not going to pivot it if we don't need to, and we don't need to. That was one of the things I did on all of the early models. I straightened it out. But like with the arms, you want there to be a little bit of a bend so the muscle structure looks proper. So if lately, unless it's the legs have been completely misaligned or mispositioned, I leave the calves where they are and just focus on the foot. So the foot, we want to rotate to counteract that adjustment we made to the thigh. So where we move the thigh that 2.5 degrees, we got to come down to the foot and move it an opposing 2.5 degrees to get it to sit flat on the line. Foot, not toe. Toe is the front half of the foot. So the foot is from about here, this square area from the ankle down to like halfway through the foot. Usually the toes line up fine. 99% of the time the toe lines up, positions itself correctly with the heel, so we don't need to mess with it. So we're just going to do the foot, which is the heel portion. So first, look at it from the side. We're going to want to pull the toe up by rotating the foot on, I believe it's the Z-axis. Nope. Z is around. Y-axis is the one we're going to counteract the thigh movement, and the X-axis. All right. So we just want to move this enough so that the toe is up just a bit. So it's as even with the heel as possible. So I'm going to do 1, 2. 1.5 for now. So we're going to have to tune this in because, okay, we have it from this side looking pretty close. Now we got to get it from the front. Since we adjusted the y-axis on the thigh by 2.5, we're also going to adjust the y-axis on the foot by 2.5, just in the opposite direction. So since we tilted the leg out with a negative 2.5, we're going to tilt the foot in with a positive 2.5, and that pretty much gets it about even. It's going to be just a smidge off. If you really want to be super obsessive about it, you can adjust the foot until wrong way. We actually want to undo it. So 2.25, maybe 2.0, depending on how severe it is. And you'll see the foot is pretty flat. You actually want to look down the length of the toe on the foot because you'll actually be able to see it clipping through the... Sorry, I'm getting too close to the mic again. You'll be able to see if it's clipping through that 0 plane line or not, so you know how far to tilt it. What's this? Jonathan Young. What do I know Jonathan Young from? I know some of his music. Made Africa featuring Caleb Hayes. Peace sign. I know this guy. Unravel peace sign. How far am I going? I'll make a man out of... Oh, he did a remix for it. Okay. All right. Again, I'm getting sidetracked. Sorry, I just heard a musician, and I really like his stuff, and this sounds super familiar, and it's bugging me that I can't think of what it is. It's not him. This is one of the My Hero Academia theme songs, I think, from Season 1. He did an English version of it. Or maybe a remix or something, but like this is... Okay. I like that. Huge otaku anime fan. My Hero Academia, I absolutely love it. But that little guitar riff just immediately made me realize I knew what this song was, and I just didn't know it off the top of my head. I've heard Jonathan Young do some other stuff, so this is a remix or maybe a translation recording of the opening theme song from the first My Hero Academia. But yeah, I know him from other stuff. It's just I heard that little jingle from the opening theme and it immediately locked in my mind. Okay, so we have the foot pretty much perfect on that 0 axis. It's exactly where we want. It is just a little bit inside that line. So it just barely clips into the ground, which is preferable to clipping or hovering above the ground whenever we get to footsteps and stuff. So we just want to mirror these numbers with the other foot, and it'll be perfect here. So 1.2, which it was already just about at. Excellent. The z-axis goes to 0, which is going to twist it. And the foot is going to go to 1.5 on the y, negative 1.5 because it's on the other side of that dividing line. Okay, and that's perfect. All right. So 2 hours and 16 minutes counting distractions and a short lunch break in. Our Ovon is lined up correctly. His bone and model structure is exactly where we want it to export out of CSS Studio. I kind of didn't go into that whenever we were first doing it. Whatever you exported in CSS Studio is going to be its default positioning and scaling and all that stuff. So if you have anything crossed over or clipping or mangled or just not looking right, that's going to be its permanent positioning. It's going to overwrite and clip over things that it wouldn't have done before, and it's going to make it a god-awful mess to try to fix in any other program like Blender. So this is where we've got it to be as accurate as possible with what we can in CSS Studio, and now we're going to export it. So we're going to do up here under scene, jump to OBJ, which is an object file. If you have files from different games or different structures, there's probably going to be multiple different things in here. All the cutscene characters are just a single individual cutscene character, and they're individual pieces and nothing else. In the older dotHack games, Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine, they had them all clustered together, so cutscene models were in a, like, they compiled all the cutscene pieces together into a single CSS file. So whenever you pulled up one of these CSS files and you looked in your clumps, you wouldn't see just one model for one character. You would see the model for every character that was in that cutscene, as well as every environment piece, all the background textures, everything that was part of that cutscene was included in it. And that made it a mess because whenever you would do an export, everything would come along with it. It made it hard to do adjustments. The object files themselves, whenever it spits out, it's going to use one object file, but it's going to reference every single clump, every single character and object. So if you would go back and do one of those, often what it'll be easier to do will be to kind of do a portion of this. You find the individual model you want, you reline it and get it set up, which I should mention at this point, as of August 2018, this Studio CCS isn't meant to work with the Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine models correctly. It'll import them. You'll be able to see all the pieces and the parts like you can with the last Recode and GU models, but they'll be scrunched up into a ball. Like all of these position pieces, it doesn't at this moment read position information correctly. So it puts everything on the 0 axis, the 0 point. So it's all clumped and clustered. I actually had to do a model export. Volunteered to do a model export for one of the other guys in the community, and it took me the better part of a week. Like if I had sat and just did nothing but grind out this model, it would have taken me several days of doing nothing but working on it to actually get it done. All told, it took 10 days, but that was me taking a few hours every day to pick at it until I got it right, because you had to position everything exactly in the right spot to make it look good, and it is such a royal pain. But so what I was saying about all that was, if you're going to use any of the models for IMOQ, Infection, Mutation, Outbreak, and Quarantine, you're going to have to pick an individual model. You're going to have to spend a lot of time getting it structured properly. Then you're going to export it with every other piece and model. That, for the most part, is fine. Whenever you get to the Blender part and you export, or rather import, that OBJ file, and it has all those individual pieces with it, you'll actually have a big listing of every single individual object and structure, and you can take and delete out everything that is not related to the single model you are working on. Just to get them out of the way. And then anything you do from then on out is just going to be that individual model, that single individual model, which I think anybody who's working with this kind of thing, that's exactly what they want. I don't think they want to try to recreate an entire cutscene with every single piece all together in one go. That would be ludicrous. And it kind of makes it a lot harder to use it for other things. Like if you pare it down and only have an individual model in the OBJ file, it's going to be a lot more usable because you're going to be able to take that single model and put it into any other property that you want to and work with it. Whereas if you keep all of the cutscene pieces together, every time you import that, you're going to every single time see every single one of those pieces for the whole layout, and that's just terrible. It's going to make it a mess of things. So, okay, so this was just for my own sanity here. I actually have a series of folders. So I have, this is for these cutscene models when I first rip and export them from Studio CCS. This is the initial import. I have a separate folder once I import that from here into Blender and do the fixes. In the first part of Blender, I do a separate export into this folder. Then in 3ds Max, I import from Blender and do this part and do the export here, and then a final Blender step. And that's, I do that as a way of kind of keeping track of every individual piece I've done. So if I do make a mistake by the end of it, I don't have to start all over from the beginning. Whereas a lot of people will do this, they'll just take the single piece, work on it with each individual program, and kind of build on it and iterate upon it. If they made a mistake on step 3, the 3ds Max portion, they can't go back in and just fix it from there. A lot of times if they break it bad enough, they'll have to go back to the very beginning and re-export it and do the whole thing from scratch. So that's why I keep it separate, just as a sanity check for myself. If I ever have to go back and fix anything, I'm going to be able to pick up from the last step that was done right and go right from there. So we're just going to export this. We want the model normals to export, even though we're going to do some adjustments to those later. We want them, at least the bare bones, out. So let's see here. So we're going to see here, it's going to output a folder in the name of the model itself, what it was read in as the folder structure. We're going to rename that to, so this is Ovon third model. So we're going to just rename that Ovon third, just for our own clarity and sanity. We're going to minimize this. One thing we're going to do here, because we're going to need to later, copy all of these textures. You'll see as part of the exploit, there's an MTL file and an OBJ file. The OBJ file is all of the bone structure and the way the pieces all work. MTL is the material file, which tells it how to overlay the textures, what it uses them for, and where to put them. Because of the way Blender kind of processes this all, it doesn't take these files with them. So whenever you move it to the next step, you're going to have to copy and paste these. So before I even get to Blender, since I'm already in this folder, since I had to rename it, I just copy those right off the bat. And then whenever I do the export from Blender, I just go into that folder and paste the textures in there. But you'll see, like I was saying earlier, so there's the this is the body, which is all of his main body pieces, the texture for Ovon's main body piece. There's the eye texture, there's the face texture, there's his hair texture, and then the SGS, which we figured out while we were ripping the model, is his sunglasses. And it just kind of keeps all of them separate so it can do what it needs to. Oh, right, we're done with this, so we're going into Blender. So in Blender, I already have a couple things set up. I have 2 scripts here that are part of like this whole process. One of them is a shadeless textures script that one of the other guys, Azure Zen, part of the community, made up, which pretty much you'll see here whenever we import the model, which is Ovon third. File, oh, I clicked the wrong thing. Right, since we're importing the file, we're going to go to File, Import, and it's an OBJ file. And then from this folder that we were just in, Ovon third, we're going to pull the OBJ or the material. You can pick either or. It's going to take both of them together since they're linked. And you're going to see we're looking at Ovon, and the colors are very dark. Anytime Blender pulls in a model like this, it tries to add shaders to the texture immediately. As you can tell, the shaders are broken. and it kind of makes it look very dark and hard to see exactly what's going on. So this little script just automates the process of going to each of the materials and turning off shadows or shaders for them. So it looks like just a bright, shiny model with the only shadows are those that are colored into the texture itself. So that makes that a lot clearer. So pretty much what we do on this step, first off is rotation. As you can see, Ovalot is looking straight into the ground. We don't want that. We're going to rotate his x-axis 90 degrees, enter, and that's going to get him standing upright. Another part of the Blender process is due to the way the GU models work with the applications that are being used with them, we actually want it to face away. His forward is going to be away from that green arrow, so we're going to go double click rotate again, go to Z-axis this time, and we're going to do a 180 on that, and that should spin him around to face opposite the green arrow. So now if you zoom in here, you see due to the work that we did before we exported it, he is standing exactly on that 0 plane, or as close as we can get without it looking terrible. But it's good. That is pretty much perfect as far as I'm concerned. We don't need to worry about fussing with it. The only thing we are going to need to do is adjust. So if you recall, there's that opaque texture over his eyeballs. So what we are going to do here is we're going to take the face. We are going to turn off view for the other pieces. We only want to see the face right now. Normally you wouldn't have to do this, but in Ovan's case, he has sunglasses, or other characters might have hair or masks or something that are kind of obscuring the face. We just want to see the face by itself for this point. So we're going to go ahead and zoom in, get a nice look at it here. And what was I got to remember here the zoom in function. Give me just 1 second. Image diff models. Well, I shot myself in the foot. I had saved a list of Blender commands that I was using here. But I guess I didn't save that window correctly before I closed it, and now it's gone. So that's a shame. Oh well. It's just I know there's a way to like zoom in to not so extreme a scale so I can get a better look at the eyes. It's going to be okay for the time being here. So since we turned off the view, we can turn this back on. It's just a little eye icon next to the model piece itself. Oh, there's a few things we're going to do here. We might as well actually save the eyes for later. This will make this a lot simpler. So we actually want to join all of the... Thunderstorm. I might have to finish this up here shortly. But we're actually going to be joining together all of the pieces except for the face. The reason we want to leave the face separate is so, like I had said earlier whenever I was doing information about adjusting the hair and such, we want to leave the face separate so it can just be yanked out, and we can get access to the eyes. The face itself can be kind of tweaked and twisted to make facial gestures and expressions without bending or breaking other pieces of the model, because usually whenever you smile and move your jawline, your entire back of your head doesn't crumple because of it. Yeah, that's what would happen if all the pieces were joined together. So since those are pretty much the only ones that are going to make a big difference, the face has a lot more fine degree of adjustments being made here. It needs to stay separate, but everything else is going to be joined. So we've now clumped those all together into this one piece. We're going to turn off the eye on it, so all of the pieces that aren't the face are just going to disappear all at once. And then we're going to go back to the face. Now here, as I said earlier, we're going to want to delete I refer to it as faces, which I know might be a little confusing, but every individual polygon that makes up the face structure has a little triangular position point. We are going to change from object mode to edit mode So we can view all of those, all these little triangles, all the polygons. And then we're going to switch from down here on the vertex select, we're going to do a faces select. So what that means is every individual piece of the eye here, we're going to see it has its own little piece. We are going to control right click and select every single piece that is part of that eye covering that we want to get rid of. So this is why I liked having those instructions up for Blender. There's a more fine zoom so that you can get a little closer and be able to better see that you're picking the correct polygons, but I don't remember how to do that off the top of my head. Actually, let me try something. So I have most of them highlighted. It's not something where you can only do it once. You better do it right or it's done. You can undo, you can redo, you can do little chunks at a time. But once you have everything selected that you want to get rid of, you just hit your delete key, and then it's going to give you the option delete vertexes, edges, faces, blah, 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 blah. Since we're selecting faces, we want to delete those faces. And then that's it right there. Where is the freaking... Oh, it was... There we go. Control, middle mouse, and then you just move the... mouse a little closer. There we go. Okay, that's what I was trying to do. So, okay, it's not perfect because it's still... The camera face kind of goes through these stuff and makes it obscures stuff, but this at least makes it a little bit bigger and a little bit easier to see each of the polygons. The faces here. So we're going to delete those. I missed this. If you control click on a piece that was already selected, you unselect it, which makes it really hard on things like this. And we are going to do this for each one of the eyes. So I don't think I showed before I took the glasses off, but I want a moment here. So, okay. So we delete out the faces. So the right eye is clear, the left eye is still obscured. If we turn back on the rest of the face structure, you can see we moved forward enough just to clip through the glasses, and you can see that his eye can now be seen through his face, which is what we want. His left eye, which we haven't deleted the faces yet, you can still see it's obscuring his eyeball itself. So here we're going to do the same process with the left eye. We're going to just control right click each one of these little faces, and then we're going to delete them out. Once again, once that's done, hit delete, remove all the faces, so the eyes are blank, turn back on this, and if we sketch around, we can see that we can see both of his eyes properly through his face now. We're going to go back from edit mode to object mode, and that's all we need to do for this part of the blender, was just make sure we rotated his model so it's standing properly, facing away from the green arrow, joined everything that wasn't the face together, and then deleted the covering, that covering over his eyes. Now we are going to do an export, again as a wavefront .obj file. Put that here as, make a new folder, and we are going to get Ovon third. One thing you want to be careful of, one, you want to make sure the naming structure stays consistent. So this is with the naming convention here, 03. So with the naming structure from GU itself, so the one at the beginning of the file name indicates it's a cutscene model. There's 1, 2, 3 in some cases, and 4 as the leading number. 1 means it's a cutscene model. 2 means it's an in-game. 3 means it's a special model. They didn't have anything consistent for it. Some cutscene models were marked as 3s. Some in-game models were marked as 3s. Most of them, I think, are kind of like hybrid models, though. Which you don't see many of. And then 4 was interesting because those were all for the volume 4 that they created for last Recode's release, where it's pretty much like it's a cutscene model, not quite up to the same quality as cutscene models we saw in these earlier versions, but was high enough quality that it had like 4K textures out of the box and stuff like that. So it's basically a cutscene model for all intents and purposes. But anyway, so the leading digit determines what type of model it is. There's a 3-letter code for each one of the characters: OVA for Ovan, HSW for Haseo, ATO for Atoli. Some of them use the Japanese names, like Zelkova was... that's why I have a spreadsheet here. So Zelkova's was KEY because he's... I can't remember his Japanese name. Not Kiori. Ki something. Yata was Yata. Taihaku is Tihaku, I guess. Tabby, ENJ for Sephora. I don't know what her Japanese name was. Syllabus used a Y instead of an I, just a romanization difference. Who was some of the other ones? Pi was PAI in the Japanese release instead of PI, like in the English. Negimaru, Natsume, NTM, Nala, Matsu, Kusibira. Kun was COON instead of KUHN. I think a lot of people can see why that might have been a problem to leave it on the original romanization when they translated it, so they adjusted that. Alcade was YOW. I forget what her name was. It's Yaoi or something like that. A lot of the names changed from Japanese to English. But anyway, and then the final numbers were, most of these were 0, 1 if it was the default, normal, standard, mostly used model. They would have 02 if it was a secondary model, 03 for a tertiary model, because like for Ovan, he has several different models because he has, I believe, 7 or 9 different models. 7, I think. 6. I stand corrected. 6, because he has 6 different forms throughout the different games. So they have to have a separate model for each one. But anyway, long story short, we're going to save that is 1ova03.obj, which is his naming convention. We're going to export that obj. I made a mistake, so I'm going to go back in and delete that. So you'll see whenever I go back to that folder, like I said earlier, we copied these textures. We're going to go back into the scene here, and you'll see we exported that on the Ovan 3rd. It only has the material and the object list without the textures themselves. Just for whatever reason, Blender doesn't export the textures, so you have to copy those over. But I made a mistake, so we're going to delete these two, and I'll re-export them. The mistake I made is that if you export it as the normal setting, whenever you go to your MTL file, which, as I said earlier, was the materials list, it uses a full location for where these files are located. So since we pulled from this folder, my PC, my D drive, virtual desktop, GU model rips, cutscene 1 ripped, and then the name of the texture, it uses that exact path whenever it's saying where the texture file is. We don't want that. That causes problems, especially if you try to give somebody else this this file. They'll try to import that the model in the MTL listing will look for a folder that they don't have on their computer. So what we have to do instead is whenever we're exporting this material, I have a preset here for GU export. So the path mode is strip path, which means instead of having that full, you know, D drive, this folder, this folder, this folder, it just cuts down and says, this is the name of the texture. Look for it in the same folder that you have the model file itself in. That's it. And it simplifies it and makes it much more shareable and makes everything work here for other people to use it. So that's it for the Blender part, first Blender part. Next, we're going to go into Autodesk 3ds Max. We are going to import the model from that we just exported from the Blender, and that is the Ovan 3rd. What we need to do in 3ds Max is, earlier I had mentioned the normals. What that is that determines how lighting and other graphics effects work for models and figures like this. So we are going to adjust the normals to fix them. Because the way they are exported from GU, since it uses a strange lighting system, we need to make it more conventional. So what I've done here, I have my 3ds Max set up to really streamline this for me. We want to add 3 normal modifiers. Normally those are located under modifiers, mesh editing, and it's, where is it here? Not edit normals, you want to add normals, so normal modifier, that's what it is. So you just select that option 3 times. It creates 3 variables, I guess, for leveraging them. Pretty much what we're going to do, like the way the structure is 3D, we're going to have one normal for the front, we're going to have one normal for the side, and we're going to have one normal for the top. And they're each going to, in a way, shine light on, and our model is going to react to that to see where a shadow should be. And then that's going to generate a normal file, so any engine that imports this file knows how the lighting parameters are supposed to work with it. So we're going to create 3 normal modifiers. We are going to set them all to unify normals. Then we are going to select them and do edit normals, which again, I have it on my hotbar here, but normally it's under modifiers, mesh editing, and instead of normal modifiers, we're going to edit the normals that we've already made here. And you're going to see a big mess of lines here. You're going to kind of hover around in this area and Control A to highlight every single one of those individual lines. So those are different, in a way of looking at it, rays of light or rays of shadow kind of interacting with our model. We want to, with all those selected, and now that we're editing the normals, we're going to kind of unify them and make them make shadows properly. So we're going to do the unify/break to average option. We're going to average all of them together. So it's going to say take the 3 points of light and create shadows from it. Move them over so you only see the shadows. So you see they are going to be away from camera position. So camera position is essentially light, and we're going to see the rays of shadow coming off of it. So you'll see between like the scarf and the legs, it's going to be casting a shadow. Between the hand and the ground is going to be casting a shadow. Between his body and the ground is going to be casting a shadow. That's perfect. That's what we want it. And lastly, we're going to unify those, which just makes them kind of work together properly. This is honestly all that Autodesk 3ds Max is used for with these model edits. We're done already. So we're going to go to export this time, and I'm going to throw that in my 3ds exports folder. We're going to make a folder for Ovan 3rd, and we're going to change the save type. We're going to change the export type to GW::object exporter. And again, we're going to name that 1OVA03 to keep with the naming convention. A very convenient part about 3ds Max, it moves the textures over for us. We had to copy and paste them whenever we did the Blender export. If you go and see the 3ds export and go to Ovan 3rd, you'll see that those files are already there. 3ds Max is smart enough that it just copies them over and does it for us, so we don't have to fiddle around. And it keeps the structure of the MTL list the same, so you'll see there's still just individual names. So the file is text_CLOVA03 hair, etc., etc. It still keeps the path simplified compared to the long path. So that's 3ds is done. So we're going to do one final thing in Blender. We're going to delete the model options that we had here before, and we are going to re-import the Ovan model from that we just exported from 3ds Max. And the reason we are going to do this is we are going to do one final script here. I don't know the details. I just know it has more to do with unifying the normals to make them work correctly. This is the script that was made by Azure Zen, who I mentioned earlier. So if we kind of, not exactly what I wanted to do, I'll fix that here soon, but all it does for every object in the content selection, so for every object we have over here, if it has a mesh object, we're going to go to BPY context scene objects active equals object. So we're going to pick each object on there. We're going to go to toggle mode. We're going to select every component of that object model. We are going to unify or set the normals to be inconsistent to recalculate. I don't know what that means. Then we're going to turn on those normals again, and then we're going to leave the edit mode. Honestly, from what I've been watching on the... How do I get back to 3D view? From what I've been trying to view and see myself, I don't think this works properly, to be perfectly honest. But I don't know enough about what the process does to prove without a shadow of a doubt that it doesn't work. So since Azure is the one that showed me how to do all these, and he said this is the last step, running this script, that's what we're going to do. So we're just have the script pulled up here. We're going to run the script. And then you'll notice, if you've been watching it all, you'll see the outlines kind of recolored themselves a little bit because it went into edit mode and came back out. It might have done something, it might have not. Either way, what we're going to do next is that's the very last step. So we're going to export it as a wavefront one last time in the last folder here. And we're going to do... Oop, that's not what I want to do. I want to do... Damn it, Blender, what are you doing? Oh, that just hides folders. Oh my goodness, I thought I was going insane there. Blender Final, we are going to make folder one last time, Ovon third. And we're gonna, it saved the name from the last export that we did, so it's still gonna keep the same naming convention. It saved that I changed my operator presets to do the strip path, so it's not gonna try to, when it read in the model, it pulled the absolute path again. So again, we're gonna need to make sure this is set to strip that path, otherwise it's gonna cause issues. And one last time, we're gonna copy these textures and paste them into here. And that's it. This is a done, completed model for Ovon, his third form. I have a few extra steps that I do for this, myself personally. While I was digging through files for this, I did manage to find some. If you look at these are all the main body file is 512 by 512 pixels. It's decent quality, but it's not amazing. While I was digging around in files for GU, last Recode Volume 4, I managed to stumble on some textures, some higher quality textures. So if we go into like the original here, so let's go into, I closed that folder, I didn't mean to. Pull this back up. So if we go into my GU project here, we go into the model rips, we go into cutscene 4, and let's say Alcade. So Alcade's body texture here was 256 by 512 pixels. I managed to find a high-res version of it, of all of the party members themselves. So Aina, and a couple of extras. So Aina, Alcade, Atoli, Endurance, Gaspard, Kaede, Kun, Pai, Sakubo, both Bo and Saku, Shino, Syllabus, Tabby, Yata, and Zelkova. No Ovon. So that's kind of a little oversight, I guess, maybe. But for all the other party members, I managed to find a version of this. Exact same files, exact same structure, just quadruple the size and resolution and clarity. And they didn't do a dumb up-res either, which is the beautiful part of it. I think that whenever they did this, they still had versions of the original files before they compressed them from GU for the PS2, and they just used those. Because if you actually get a good zoom in, you see the like pixelation in the hilt of, I think that's a sword hilt, wrapping. So if you actually zoom in on the high resolution model, you'll see that it doesn't have that pixelation. It doesn't have, like, it doesn't look messy like somebody tried to use a program to up-res it. It looks like this was how it was originally drawn before they compressed it and shrunk it and made it a lesser quality. This is a little odd. this is the first time I'm just now noticing there is a very slight difference here in Alkade's. You'll see this structure piece and this piece looks different than over here, but this is the first one I'm seeing where some of these things are slightly repositioned. So I might not be able to put this one in because hers is a little different, but let's do another one that I know is the same. So I know Kuhn's worked because I already double checked. His was the one I kind of used as the default test subject with here. So there's Kuhn's. And again, you can even see just opening up with the regular paint or the regular photo viewer that this is so much bigger and more detailed and structured. You can see all the pieces are the same in structure, so these files are exactly the same. The Alkades aren't, so I'm going to have to go back and fix that because I think I already handed those over with the incorrect version. I'm going to have to double check the others, but Kuhn and most of the others look exactly this, are structured exactly the same. And as I said, you can see that there wasn't any artifacting, no pixelation. The colors don't look weird. There's no obvious, it's not like they took some kind of algorithm and tried to up-res it. And it's noticeable because you tend to get these really messy looks. It looks like this was literally as drawn originally a decade and change ago, and they just took the original file and put it in GU and kicked it out there. So every time I've been doing an upload of one of these models that has a high definition version of it, I've just been plugging it in because it looks so much cleaner and so much more accurate, and high quality is kind of what I'm shooting for here. The only thing I had to do whenever I originally found these, they were not positioned the same. So they were flipped horizontally, just flipped on the axis. Like if we pop this open, we saw that this piece was actually up here and this wavy line was down near the bottom. Most of these, depending on what they were using it for, it looks like the version, the volume 4 models flipped the way it read textures for whatever reason. So they're all upside down, but all you had to do was go into, I think I pulled them into paint.net, just did a vertical flip on it and save them, and that worked perfectly. They all look great. And I've tested a few models like this, and whenever you get the mesh properly, they look fantastic. It's super nice. But anyway, that's the ins and outs and the full of it. That's the process of ripping a model out of dotHack with Studio CCS, positioning it properly, exporting it to Blender to combine the pieces to get it positioned correctly, to get rid of the eye covering so you can see the eye through the face structure and actually see eye movement properly, changing the normals and shadowing rather, and just getting it ready to be used in Blender or Maya or any other kind of program that would be able to use OBJ models like this. From here on out, I don't know if any of you follow this or not. These are all getting put on DeviantArt under Azure Zen's page. I don't know what his page is off the top of my head, honestly. But they're available through DeviantArt page. They're available if you have access to his Dropbox, which has a lot of other resources like that. Or, sorry, not Dropbox, his Google Drive, which has a lot of other resources like that. I don't know if he publicly shares that or if he just uses that as like a storehouse for his own personal stuff. But there's a lot of objects like this. This is probably, you see in my text document here, every time I created a model, I've marked a date on it. So today, since we got Ovon's third form, that is 8/6/18. And out of the whole count here, everyone that has a date is one I've done. Tilde means there was no cutscene model for an in-game model. The X's are the couple I haven't gotten yet, and the pipes are ones that somebody else has created already. So there was a handful that were created by other community members. I came through, and in the last month, and like I said, it's actually been just a little over a month. It looks like I started doing this on July 3rd-ish was when I first did them. But yeah, I've been just kind of busting out a bunch of these to just try to get them done. So you'll be able to find those if you have any use for them for any projects or need them for whatever reason for reference or anything. They're available on DeviantArt. They shouldn't be very hard to find if you have access to Zen's Google Drive to get them, great. They'll be there. It's going to probably, I know it's going to be uploaded on my Dropbox, which I don't share publicly, but I'll have it out there for Zen later here in like half hour probably, and then he's free to do whatever he does with it. I don't know how frequently he uploads, probably not a daily thing, so maybe by the end of the week, best guess, based on his schedule, you'd be able to access this model that I've done here today and exported. But if you guys are interested, I might stream 1 or 2 more of these again, or similar processes that I'm going through, because there's a bunch of different stuff I'm kind of working on right now. But hopefully that 3-hour step-by-step will give you guys an idea of the work that goes into these kinds of things. If you ever want to get into it or do something like it, if you want to do any of this exact stuff, if you want to help out and pitch in with the community, Studio CCS by Casually Noted is pretty easy to find with a Google search. I'm pretty sure it was Casually that did it. Studio CCS. No, this is Keith's. So if you Google where is that at? It's on. Wow. All right, Google is being really annoying here today. Let me see if I can find the link to it for anybody who actually wants it. While we listen to some more Starbomb in the background. There we go. GitHub NC Dyson Studio CCS. So this is the exact program I was using to export the model, or sorry, rather to import the models from the game itself to fix the bones and export them out. And Blender is easily findable. 3ds Max is a business application that you can find out there to use do the tweaks and stuff. This is the GitHub for Studio CCS. There's usually a couple things before you even get to this point. In order to rip open and see the models itself, I had to use a different application. Let's see here, that was CryPack Tools to rip open the original bin file to get access to all the CCSs. That's also easily findable if you just Google CryPack Tools. It was part of community project to do model editing and texture adjustment, that kind of stuff for things with the CryEngine games, and it works for a lot of other programs at this point. So you just use it to rip any of the bin files you find in GU, and they'll give you the CCSs that you can work with Studio CCS. But yeah. If any of you guys watch this now or later, come back to it and see it. If you have any questions, if you want to drop me a line, let me know about anything. You can shoot me a message through, does Twitch have direct messaging? I'm sorry, I don't use Twitch very often. The video is going to be copied over to YouTube here shortly. I might break it up into some like half-hour chunks or something like that. But if you guys manage to find it, if you have any questions, let me know. I should be able to find my Twitter. If you have anything to shoot at me over there, it's going to be @daft_inquisitor, just like my Twitch name. So shoot me any questions. If you want anything more fleshed out for tutorial-wise, you want to see anything else like it, let me know, and I'll see what streams I'm doing in the future. But in the meantime, if you guys have lasted this long, thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you'll be... have all the tools you need to if you want to give this kind of thing a shot yourself. Thanks.